Hi everyone, today we are delving into the most important HL topic, market structures and market power. And before you click away because market structures sounds boring, let me ask you this. Why does your iPhone cost way more than it costs Apple to make it? Why do gas prices, petrol prices seem to magically move altogether? Why can your local coffee shop charge $8 for a latte when the beans cost maybe 50 cents? The answer, market power. So, not all markets are created equal, all right? Some markets are super competitive with tons of firms fighting over your money. Others, one or two massive firms basically control everything. And the amount of power these firms have completely changes how they behave. This is literally the economics behind every price you see, every product choice you make, and every "why is this so expensive" moment that you've ever had. So let's break down the 4 key market structures. Understand what market power actually means and figure out why economists get so worked up about monopolies. Firstly, let's establish our framework. Market structures exist on a spectrum based on one key concept, market power. This is the ability of a firm to influence the price of its product. Think of it like this. If there's no market power, you are a price taker. You have to accept whatever price the market sets. Maximum price power is when you are a price maker. You literally decide what to charge. We've got, therefore, 4 main market structures. The first, on the left there, perfect competition. There is 0 market power. They are price takers. Then you've got, all the way to the right, monopoly. All right? They are maximum market power or complete price makers. In between, you've got monopolistic competition, which is a little market power. They are slight price makers. And oligopolies, as well as having one of the most fun names, they are significant with regards to market power, definite price makers. The more market power a firm has, the more they can charge above their costs, the more profits that they make. And here's the kicker. The more allocatively inefficient they are and the more welfare loss they create. So if we start from the left, all right, let's have a look. Perfect competition, okay? This is the gold standard. It is basically the economist's fantasy world. It requires many buyers and sellers. We're talking thousands. It requires homogeneous products, identical products, no branding, no differentiation. It requires there to be free entry and exit. Anyone can start a business. Anyone can leave. It requires perfect information where everyone knows everything about the prices and the quality of the products. There is no barriers to entry, 0 startup costs, 0 restrictions. So just being real, this doesn't really exist. The closest examples might be agricultural commodities, wheat, corn, before the branding. Foreign exchange markets, maybe some online marketplaces for identical products. Okay? Why are firms price takers in perfect competition? Well, if you try to charge even 1 cent more than the other producers, consumers are just going to buy from your competitors because the products are identical and everybody has perfect information. This creates what we see of a horizontal demand curve. Let me repeat that to the people in the back. Price is going to equal demand, which is going to equal average revenue, which is also going to equal marginal revenue. The firm basically faces a perfectly elastic demand curve at the market price. They can sell as much as they want at this price, but nothing above it. Profit maximization, that's where the magic comes in. Marginal cost equaling marginal revenue. So every firm, regardless of the market structure, will maximize their profits where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. Why? Well, because if your marginal revenue is greater than your marginal cost, then you should produce more. You're making more profit per additional unit. If your marginal cost is greater than your marginal revenue, you should produce less because you're actually losing money on each additional unit. When marginal revenue equals marginal cost, therefore, it's perfect. You are maximizing your profits. We can also talk about what's called the short run versus the long run. In the short run, firms can make abnormal profits, supernormal profits, where their average revenue is greater than their average costs. Firms can make normal profits, where average revenue is equal to average costs. Firms can also make losses, where average revenue is less than average costs. See them in the diagrams. In the long run, here's what's important. In perfect competition, in the long run, abnormal profits won't last. Why? Because there's free entry and exit. If firms are making an abnormal profit, new firms are going to enter, supply is going to increase, price will decrease until only normal profit remains and average revenue equals average costs. In the long run, perfectly competitive firms only make normal profit, just enough to keep them in business. We see, however, that with perfect competition, there is allocative efficiency. This is where price equals marginal cost, or your marginal benefit equals your marginal cost. Society's welfare is maximized. We are producing exactly the right amount of goods where we benefit the consumers, the price that they're willing to pay, and it equals the cost to society, those marginal societal costs. This is why economists love perfect competition. They are the benchmark for efficiency. So an exam tip, when drawing perfect competition diagrams, always show the market diagram, supply and demand determining the price, the firm diagram showing marginal cost, average total cost, horizontal, average revenue equal marginal revenue at the market price. Label your profit maximizing quantity where marginal cost equals marginal revenue and shade in any areas of profit or loss clearly. Now there is another one. Let's have a look at the next one. At the other end of the scale, you've got monopolies. Those were maximum market powers and maximum problems. This is the complete opposite. We have a single seller, one dominant firm. Maybe they've got more than 25% of the market share. They've got a unique product. There are no close substitutes. High barriers to entry, that's key. Price makers, the firm is the market, so they determine it. Are there any barriers to entry? What is it that keeps the competitors out? There could be legal barriers like patents, licenses, government regulations. There could be technological barriers, proprietary technology. It could be the control of essential resources. Think about companies like De Beers, who controlled the diamond mines. All right. Could be economies of scale. There's natural monopolies, and we'll talk about them in a sec. All right, there could be high startup costs. How do you compete with a company that has high startup costs, like your local water company? Let's look at some real-world examples. Google, right? Good search engine, 90% of the market share. Historically, Microsoft Windows. Standard Oil, the company. What about the local utilities, water, electricity, the diamond industry we talked about, De Beers. Maybe there are some prescription medications with patents. The monopoly diagram, unlike perfect competition, monopolies face a downward sloping demand curve. Why? Well, they are the market. To sell more, they're going to have to lower prices. A key relationship here is obviously average revenue equaling demand. Right? Marginal revenue will be less than average revenue. This is because to sell one more unit, they have to lower the price on all of their units. Same rule still applies, however, about profit maximization. Marginal cost has to equal marginal revenue. But here's the difference. Average revenue will be greater than marginal cost at the profit maximizing quantity. This means they're charging more than the marginal cost. That's market power in action. The problem with monopolies is that they are allocatively inefficient. Price is greater than marginal cost. This is a market failure. Society values this good more than it costs to produce, but the monopoly is going to restrict output, charging a higher price, creating deadweight loss. Higher prices, maybe lower output compared to a perfectly competitive model. Monopolies produce less and charge more, therefore there is welfare loss. Consumer surplus will decrease. Producer surplus will increase the monopoly profits, but there is a net loss to society, that famous deadweight loss triangle. So for your exams, for 15-mark essays, you might need to draw the monopoly diagram correctly, show a comparison with a perfectly competitive model, shade in and label any welfare loss. Explain why allocative inefficiency occurs, price being greater than marginal cost. Now, a natural monopoly is an exception. Sometimes monopolies are actually more efficient than competition. A natural monopoly is when one firm can supply an entire market at a lower cost than multiple firms. This happens when there are huge economies of scale, when there is high fixed costs and low marginal costs, when your average costs keep falling as output increases. Examples might include your electricity grid, the water network, railways. All right? The average curve never stops falling. It is always cheaper to have one firm. What's the government response to natural monopolies? Often they're going to allow natural monopolies. All right? But maybe regulate the prices, or maybe public ownership might be an option. The next one that we look at is oligopolies. This is the real world, and here's where it gets really interesting, because oligopolies are everywhere. Right? There are a few large firms, they dominate the market. There are high barriers to entry. These businesses are what we say is interdependent. This is a key characteristic. Right? There is product differentiation. Their products are similar, but not identical. So real-world examples, the classic examples, smartphones, think about Apple and Samsung. Soft drinks, Coca-Cola and Pepsi. Airlines, the small number of major international carriers. What about streaming services with your Netflix, Disney+, Amazon? Gaming consoles, your PlayStations, your Xboxes, your Nintendos. Interdependence is one of the key features with regards to this. Unlike other market structures, oligopolies have to constantly think about what their competitors are going to do. If Coca-Cola lowers its prices, Pepsi will respond. If Samsung releases a new phone, Apple is watching. If Netflix raises its prices, people might switch to Disney+. This interdependence creates some fascinating behaviors. We can talk about collusive oligopolies. Those are ones who act like a monopoly. Sometimes oligopolies collude. They might secretly agree to fix prices, to limit output, to divide up a market. And if they do that successfully, they are acting like a monopoly and creating the same level of welfare loss. Real-life example would be OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. They literally meet deciding oil production levels. The problem is that everybody in an oligopoly has got an incentive to cheat on the agreement. If everyone keeps prices high, I can undercut slightly and steal all of the customers. But if everyone cheats, we're back to competition. This is where game theory comes in. Game theory, we look at the prisoner's dilemma for oligopolies. We've got two firms, they can keep prices high, cooperate, or low and compete. All right? We can figure out what is called a Nash equilibrium. This is where both firms might charge a low price, even though they'd both actually be better off charging a higher price. Neither are going to risk being the sucker who charges higher prices whilst the other firm goes and charges lower ones. Exam tip: for oligopoly questions, examiners love asking you to construct a payoff matrix. They love asking you to identify Nash equilibriums or to explain why collusion is unstable. Look at real-world examples, all right? Think about those. Non-collusive oligopolies, that's the number 2. There's no collusion there, but they might have sticky prices, right? Because there's a risk of a price war. If one company lowers their prices, the competitors are going to match it. Everyone's profit will fall. If I raise my prices, competitors won't match them. I lose customers. The result, prices stay stable for long periods of time. Non-price competition occurs. This is instead of competing on prices, oligopolies focus on branding, the just do it sort of idea, the impossible is nothing advertising, the Super Bowl commercials costing millions of dollars. They might focus on product differentiation, so your iPhone versus your Galaxy phones with regards to features. Customer service, loyalty programs, warranties, innovation, new features, new products. As they come out, those are differentiation strategies. We can talk about what's called market concentration, where we are measuring the oligopoly's power using concentration ratios, right? So how big a market share does the top 4 firms have, all right? Like monopolies, oligopolies will create welfare loss because the price will be greater than marginal cost. Output is restricted below a competitive level, but it is typically less inefficient than a pure monopoly because some competition exists. Now, monopolistic competition is kind of the best of both worlds. It's got characteristics that are in common with both competition and monopolies. There are many firms like competition. There is free entry and exit like perfect competition. There is product differentiation like a monopoly. There is some market power like a monopoly, but maybe much less. Real-world examples would include restaurants in a city, hair salons, clothing manufacturers. Right? These are all real-life examples. All right? Now, when we look at those, we've got to think here quite carefully about why we want these. Is there a case for monopolies? Is there a case for, all right, market power? So, your local coffee shop isn't selling the same products as the one just down the street. There is some differentiation there. All right? Now, let's have a think. What is the case for market power? In an exam, you need to be able to argue both sides. All right? So, let's zoom out. We've seen market power creating allocative inefficiency and welfare loss. But what are some advantages of firms that have market power? Here we see economies of scale, lower average costs, able to pass the savings on to consumers. Natural monopolies would be the extreme case of that. Dynamic efficiency with research and development, innovation occurring. That would be good. Right? Maybe they can research and develop new products, new techniques. Right? Pharmaceutical companies, tech firms. Would we have an iPhone without Apple's market power and profit to fund research and development? What about drugs that are available from the pharmaceutical companies? All right. International competitiveness. Large firms can compete globally because of their economies of scale. There are risks, however. All right. These are the downsides to having monopoly power. Lower output. All right. Welfare loss. Consumer surplus is decreasing. There is less consumer choice. Monopolies don't need to differentiate, so fewer varieties. Without competitive pressure, the firms might get lazy, creating an X inefficiency. Less innovation than they could possibly achieve. Rent-seeking behaviour. They may use resources to maintain their monopoly power, like lobbying. Resources can be wasted. For your exams, let's have a think. What can we think about for your exams? All right. Well, very straightforward, always present both sides. While market power creates allocative efficiency and welfare loss. However, the significance depends on the context. Give examples. What government intervention? They don't just sit back and watch monopolies exploit markets. They're going to intervene. So the first one, legislation, antitrust laws, preventing monopolies, merger controls, blocking mergers, price regulations, capping prices. The EU fined Google billions of euros for abuse of their monopoly power. Breaking up the monopolies, forcing the large firms to split into smaller competitors. A historic example would be AT&T, which was broken up in 1984. Should we break up the big tech companies? Good question. Government ownership, maybe nationalisation, where the government runs the monopoly itself, removing the profit motive, may still have inefficiencies. Fines, punish the anti-competitive behaviour, deter collusion, put fines on it. However, any intervention isn't free. There are regulatory burdens and bureaucracies and inefficiencies that come as costs. But as benefits, it might reduce the welfare loss. It might reduce the level of prices and provide more competition. So economists need to debate the optimal level of intervention. All right, now let's wrap up. Let's think about your exam strategy. Let's bring this home. Here we go. Key takeaways. Market structures exist on a spectrum of market power, from perfect competition with zero power to monopoly maximum power. All firms maximize their profits, where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. That's universal. Market power creates allocative inefficiency, where price is greater than marginal cost, therefore welfare loss occurs. Oligopolies are characterized by interdependence, game theory explaining their behavior. Trade-offs exist. Market power creates static inefficiency, but may enable dynamic efficiency through research and development. So what sorts of questions could we consider? All right. Let's think about 10-mark questions, defining terms, drawing accurate diagrams, explaining the theory, giving a real-world example. For 15-mark questions, however, you've got to do all of that, plus comparing the different structures, evaluating examples and disadvantages, and using multiple real-world examples. Where is the welfare loss? What is it? Why is it significant? And then, in your conclusion, you're going to use the phrase, it depends on whatever the context. All right? Check all of your diagrams. Make sure they're all correct. Okay, what sorts of possible questions could we ask? All right, let's have a look. Here we go. Explain why monopolies create allocative inefficiency. 10 marks. Done. Evaluate whether oligopolies are more efficient than monopolistic competitors. 15 marks. With reference to game theory, explain why cartels are often unstable. Good one for 10 marks. Discuss whether the benefits of a monopoly power outweigh the costs. 15 marks. What could you look at real world wise? The Google and the antitrust cases, lots of those. OPEC and oil production, pharmaceutical patent issues, big tech regulations. What about airlines and oligopolies price fixing scandals? Market structures, final thoughts here, final thoughts. Market structures aren't just academic theory. Okay? They explain the prices that you pay, the choices you have, the innovations that you see every single day. Understanding why market power helps you to see why governments will regulate certain industries, why some markets will work better than others, and why economists spend so much time studying firms' behaviour. So the next time that you're paying $8 for coffee, you'll know whether it's monopolistic competitors, product differentiation, or just straight up market power at work. Remember that the IB wants you to see and understand the theory, the application of it, the evaluation of it. Master those elements and you're unstoppable. Now go practice your diagrams. Seriously, the diagrams, they give you marks. See you in your next video. Please, thank you very much for listening. Please like and subscribe, share the video, and we'll see you on the next one. Hei kōnera.